us today. As you may have seen, there was a new release of the interfaces that was announced this morning, so that's very exciting. So Matt and Christine are going to be talking about a particular update that was made to the variant curation interface regarding capture of case level and segregation evidence. So as this is a fairly significant change, we wanted to make sure that everybody was clear on how that works. So Matt, I'll let you take it away. Just one quick reminder, though, before we get started, if everyone can please mute yourselves, just to reduce the background noise. If you do have any questions, of course, feel free to ask, but otherwise, if you could please keep yourselves muted. Thanks so much. All right, and I will also send around a recording of the call afterwards and the slides, just so that everybody has that. Okay, Matt, so whenever you're ready.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. Hello, everyone. I think this will be a relatively quick update today. As Jenny said, we had our latest release, R28, that came out yesterday. The main feature of that release was case segregation granular evidence capture. I'm going to bring to your attention a few important things to bear in mind when you go forth into the VCI and start using this new feature. Slide changing. Oh, there we go. First, I'll briefly remind you of the way you've been adding case segregation evidence up until yesterday. We're calling this old way the retired format. So under the retired format in the case segregation tab, you previously had the option of adding evidence from publications by clicking on the Add Evidence buttons found in each section. This would make the PubMed modal appear, where you can write in a PubMed ID. You could retrieve the article details, such as the first author, the title, journal details, etc. And upon checking you have the right article, you could click the Add Article button. Within the tab section where you started, you now have the option of selecting the specific ACMG criteria associated with that evidence. One thing to note at this point is that, and this will be relevant actually later in the presentation, is that not all the PubMed evidence added by curators was associated with an ACMG criteria. This is partly because some evidence was added before the option to select criteria code was introduced, but also because this was not a required field, so curators didn't always choose to make that selection. So continue on, curators could write a block of text explaining the evidence in the PubMed article, and then they could save it. And this is how the saved PubMed article would appear in the VCI, associated with the block of text that was added by the curator. So now on to the new format that was introduced yesterday. Just like the old way, you start off in the section of the case segregation tab that contains the ACMG criteria relevant to your evidence. A little bit of background noise, I don't know who that is, but anyway. So you start off in the case segregation tab in the section that's pertinent to the evidence that you're looking at, and you click on the Add Evidence button. As before, a modal pops up that allows you to enter the PubMed ID, retrieve the details for that article, and then you click the Next button to proceed. And that's when it all changes, because instead of only being able to write a block of text and save it, now a form appears that allows you to store the granular data you found in that PubMed article. Each of the fields you see in this form were specified by the Curation Working Group, and these fields allow you to add in the numbers of each type of evidence and also an associated comment. This Add Evidence form is too long to show on one slide, so here I'm just showing you the bottom of the form with the remainder of the fields. You, of course, when you're in the VCI, you'd be able to just scroll up and down to see the relevant bits in the form. All of the ACMG criteria within the case segregation tab are represented across the totality of this form. You're also guided slightly by the green shading you can see here, which tells you which section of the case segregation tab you were in when you started to add the specific evidence. So in this case, PP1 and BS4 is shaded green because I started in the case segregation data section when I was in the case segregation tab. However, the green shading is merely there for your guidance. You can, in fact, add in any case segregation evidence from an article at the same time, so you can fill in other fields, not just the green shaded ones. And each piece of evidence you add will auto-magically appear in the correct section back in the case segregation tab. So I'll show you that now. So here I've added in 2 segregations and 3 non-segregations, along with the associated comments. And so then if I click on the Submit button, you'll see that back in the segregation data section, in the case segregation tab, the PubMed article has been added. And instead of just a block of text was previously in the retired format, it's now saved as specific numbers and associated text. I can, of course, choose to click Edit, in which case it would take me back to the Add Evidence form to make any edits, and I'd save them, or I can delete the PubMed article. But both of these actions are restricted to the affiliation that added the evidence. So in this case, I can edit or delete them, but other users won't be able to. The other nifty feature is an evidence tally table that now appears at the top of the case segregation tab. This appears once you've added in evidence in the new format. Again, this is too long a table to just fit onto one slide, so this is just the top of it. Here you can see there's one evidence column that represents the single PubMed that was added, PubMed article that was added, with the first author, name and year of the article at the top of the column, who submitted it underneath that. And below that, the evidence that's been added by the submitter for that article. In this case, it's just the PP1 and BS4 evidence that I added. For each new PubMed article that gets added, a new column gets added to the tally table to represent the data added from that article. So you see two columns now. Additionally, the sum column, there we go, okay. Sum column keeps track of all the data that's saved across all the evidence columns, and so provides a running tally of all the totals for each type of evidence. So for instance, for PP1, 3 and 2 have been summed to 5 total segregations in the sum column. And that gets updated each time new or updated segregation evidence gets added to the VCI and hence gets added to this table. Because your text comments might get quite lengthy and make this table too long, instead we've introduced an ellipsis after a certain number of characters in your text, but if you mouse over it, you can see the full text. You can also edit your own evidence directly from this table by clicking on the pencil at the top of the relevant column. This will take you back to the Add Evidence form where you can make your edits and then save them again. Additionally, you can directly delete your own evidence in this table by clicking on the dustbin icon, or sorry, with America, sorry, the trash can icon. And you'll see a warning before you confirm your deletion. So this two-step process prevents you from accidentally deleting your evidence and having to add it again. Now, I'm sure you're wondering at this point, what will happen to your old evidence that you added prior to yesterday's release that was saved in the old retired format? Well, clearly not. The data is still all there, but for a few reasons, we couldn't transfer it auto-magically for you in the VCI. First, as I mentioned earlier, much of the evidence that was added previously was not associated with a specific A, C, and G criterion, such there's no way of us knowing which criteria it should belong with in the new format. But also, because it was previously written as a block of text, there isn't a simple means of transposing this out into the granular evidence format. Therefore, the only quick and safe option for these data is for people who added, well, specific people who added it, or the affiliation who added it, to transpose it themselves into the new format. However, we have given you a helping hand. Here you can see the data from a record entered in the retired format. These data appear in the relevant section of the case segregation tab. In this case, the allele data section with its PM3 evidence. And this retired format data is displayed separately in a retired format table. If you hover over the I button in the header of that table, there's some instructional text telling you what to do. But basically, for each piece of retired evidence, you can click on the Add in New Format button. This will take you directly to the Add Evidence form that's specific to that evidence. And there you'll find the block of text you previously added. It's now being copied to the bottom of the form within the additional comments field. You can then paste the numbers and comments across to the correct fields within the form and then resubmit them. And now these will be added in the new format in the relevant section. After you've moved across the evidence to the new format, then you can go ahead and delete the evidence from the retired format table. And you should repeat that process for all the evidence you have in the retired format. Eventually, once you've transferred all the retired format data to the new format, then and you've deleted the old retired format data, then that table will just disappear altogether, so you won't need to see it anymore. In this first version of this new feature that was released yesterday, it's designed for adding PubMed ID evidence only. However, in a subsequent release, this will be expanded so you can add case segregation data from other sources, such as from clinics, clinical labs, research labs, etc. Additionally, we're now working on providing you with more contextual help, especially guidance text to help you know what kinds of data you should or should not be adding into these fields. Finally, we also plan to introduce evidence specification. So this is where you could specify which specific pieces of evidence you use to evaluate an ACMG criterion. So this matters because right now 2 different groups could currently add the same piece of evidence, and without being able to specify which evidence they use for the evaluation, then both would be counted in the sum total. So for instance, here the same paper's been added twice by 2 different affiliations, so the one segregation has been double counted, which bumps the total erroneously up from 6 to 7. The evidence specification feature that fixes this is currently winding its way through the new ClinGen software prioritization process, so hopefully this will be sorted out for you soon. But in the meantime, please look out for duplicate evidence added by other affiliations and users in the same table so that you can look out for double counting. As always, if you want to find out any information about the VCI or want to register, then please email myself and Christina at our help desk. You can also get more information in our help docs via a pull down in the header, or if you just want to go to the VCI and have a play with this new feature, you can do that without messing up your records in production by just going to the demo interface. Finally, the case segregation feature is brought to you by the hard work of the Stanford Informatics team, working in collaboration with the Biocurator working group who provided all the specifications for it. But all of the actual development was done by these 2 people you can see here, Gloria and Adolfo, so big thanks to them. And that's all I have, Jenny.
Great, thank you so much, Matt. That was really helpful to see how this is all going to work. Does anyone have questions for Matt? Or Christine is also on the line as well.
This is Megan. I had a question. First of all, this is awesome. Thanks, Matt and Christine and others. I'm still getting a hand on what I see in what tabs as far as if I'm only seeing my own data versus other submitters' data when I'm in any given variant. And so regarding the double counting, so I assume what you're saying there is if I'm under the case segregation tab and I'm looking at the specific level of evidence, I would potentially see there submissions by other affiliations and or other users. I guess my question is, like if I'm in a P53 affiliation and other people had commented, like whose information would I see there? Like when am I in danger of potentially having a double count?
So the way that the VCI works is that it acts as a pool of evidence. So any evidence that's been added by anyone, you can currently see. That's the way this is currently set up.
Under their personal affiliation or a VCEP affiliation.
Yeah. So within that tally table, for instance, and within each section, you would see everyone's evidence. It's just that you can't edit someone else's evidence.
Got it.
So that's why we want to move across to having evidence specification, because you would then, when you have that tally table, for instance, at the top, you would just be able to select ones you want to view and include in your evaluation. You would choose, and particularly if there's like duplications like that, you could just choose which one you wanted to include.
Thanks.
Cool.
So Matt, just so everyone's clear on this, so the VCI will continue to show old data basically forever, right? But at any point you can then decide, like for example, if you're reassessing a variant, that's the point at which you would want to switch over to this new view. Is that right? Or is there a recommended time frame for when people should switch over their information from the retired version to the new version?
No, you're right. That will be there forever now. So, there is no time scale in which people have to transfer it across. But the benefit of transferring it across, obviously, as soon as possible, is that when you transfer it to the new format, then it will appear in the table at the top as well. It won't appear there really until you've transferred it across.
So can you show again how to transfer? I'm confused by that. And this is supposed to be showing up when we use it now, or is this coming out in a new release?
Oh no, it will come up now. So so when you go to a section, within, flipping forward. There we go. So if you were in, for instance, this allele data section here, and this was the data that you'd added previously, it would appear in this separate table, this retired format table. Any that were added in the new format would appear in another table above this one. But with the retired format evidence, you click on the Add in New Format button. Here we go. And it would take you directly to the Add Evidence form, the form where you edit the evidence for that format article. And there you could like change, like transfer, like here in one, you can actually transfer or fill in the data yourself here.
Okay, I'm trying to get onto the clinical genome site, and I keep getting something that says bad gateway. I don't know what is going on.
No, I can tell you what that is. That's just a temporary glitch. Like Brian needs to just restart the instance after the release. But unfortunately, Brian had a blowout on one of his tires, so he's in the auto shop. So it'll be a couple of hours, unfortunately, before he gets around to like restarting the instance today. But within a couple of hours, that should be fine.
Okay. All right. I thought that was me.
Yeah.
All right.
No, it's not you. It is like a temporary glitch on it.
Okay.
So what would happen then, Debbie? So once you've been through and like changed all these, you would then go through and delete each one of these, and then eventually this table would just completely disappear. You wouldn't have the need for it anymore. And then from that point on, all the evidence you add would be in the new format.
There's like nothing but.
It's just that we had to do this because we had to provide a way of people being able to transfer the data from their old the old format into the new format.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if this is for PM3. This will apply to anywhere that you add literature evidence. Is that right?
In the case segregation tab, yeah.
In case segregation, okay, all right.
Could be. I mean, so like.
There's been a new though. So, like for instance, when I was doing PP3 rule the other day and adding in a citation for computational, there's also the option now to choose the evidence code. And I think that was required, was it, for PP3 as well? Is it required for any time you add literature evidence?
Yeah, so so in the other ones as well, like you have a pull down for that section, which gives you the option of selecting. But unfortunately, that feature is not always available. So we don't always have the ACMG criteria code associated with each piece of evidence.
Okay. Well, I mean, I wanted to comment because like in that case, so like I was citing one of the papers, but for the TP53 group, you have to have 2 pieces of evidence to meet that criteria. And so, I mean, I tagged it as that evidence, but that paper alone does not make it meet that criteria. And so that's why just wanted to like say, I tagged it with that evidence, but it's actually not, it's actually combinatorial in order to meet that evidence.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good point, Deb. And this is Jenny. I've done that as well. Like even if that piece of evidence doesn't meet that particular code, if you're for that code, I typically do tag it. For example, for PM3, if the other variant, so if I'm looking at a recessive disorder and the variant in trans is just a VUS, so I can't actually count PM3, I would still tag it with PM3, but just put my little blurb in there, just explain what the data was and say, this doesn't actually, count towards my final points because whatever explanation, it was a VUS or the patient didn't meet PP4 or whatever. So I tag it that way because that's what I was assessing it for. I assume others are doing it similarly, or does anyone look at that differently?
So that's sort of how I see it. It's hard.
I mean,
right, Jenny, I think that's how we intended it to be used, just as a way to track it, even if you can't apply the code. So you guys, I think, are doing it correctly.
Great. Thanks, Marina.
Yeah, I think that though I think about it for later on wanting to use this where like ultimately after we've done a lot of curations and collected a lot of data associated with evidence codes, we'd like to mine the literature with those evidence codes and try and understand like what's in these documents that's supporting those evidence codes. But that's where I think there might be issues and where we may need some systematic way to note that this paper does not reach this evidence code by itself, or that this is used in combination. I mean, maybe they'll be able to do it by seeing there's 2 literature sources cited for that thing, and so then they can assume from there that one wasn't enough to fulfill it, and it has to be both or something. But I was just keeping that in mind as I did it, that
But I think
like it's kind of I'm not putting in the correct, it's not exactly true, right? That piece of evidence is by itself standalone the reason it's achieved that evidence code.
Yeah. Does anyone else have thoughts on that question?
That's a really good point. I mean, we see that elsewhere in the VCI, for functional studies, if you might have, 2 different papers that together support adding PS3, but
I guess
each one
so.
wouldn't. We just kind of have to, as a curator, you know in your head that you're not applying criteria just based on the one paper. I wonder if this is kind of a consistent issue instead of just saying like, quote PM3. You could say like suggest PM3 or consider PM3, something to make it more clear that this one paper alone doesn't meet criteria.
Yeah, like a test for PM3 or something like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of background noise. I wonder, can you please all mute yourselves if you're not talking?
A lot of these people, it's not
Where that's coming from.
Actually, so I mean, Jessica, that's a great suggestion. I think it'd be really easy to implement too, because it'd just be adding another choice to a drop-down box, right? So we would have PS3, and then we would have like assessed for PS3, or a something that just couches it to say this is part of the evidence for this code, but by itself doesn't stand alone. Then if you have a paper that by itself does stand alone, then you can put PS3, or you can put like the evidence code that stands alone for it. But that would be, I think, a fairly easy way to add in another choice, another set of choices to the drop-down box.
I wonder if the descriptor should be something like contributes to, because like, I don't know, when I think
that's
or
great.
Maybe we just all need to be aware, because if I saw assessed, I think I would think like, oh, it was looked at for this, but it wasn't quite enough, like I wouldn't think about it intuitively of like, oh, this is, adding to scoring this code.
I think contributes to PS3. So for every one of the whichever evidence codes in this section it is, we would have PS3, and then if that paper standalone achieves that, you put that, and otherwise you put contributes to. And I think that will make it very straightforward from there forward. So if, yeah.
And then for evidence that did not meet that code, it was assessed for that code but did not meet the code.
Okay, so you want something too where you could put that paper and then say it didn't meet it, and it didn't even contribute to meeting it.
Right, and it was.
And it didn't contribute to benign.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Okay.
again,
Not sufficient, maybe.
Yeah, not sufficient for PM3. So I mean, PM3 is a good example, I guess, for like I say, recessive disorders where the variant in trans is not the VUS, or there's just something that doesn't. It doesn't mean it's not involved. You just don't know. You just don't have the evidence to actually apply that code. Yeah.
Would that be different than the functionality we have right now to have like PS3 not met and all of that?
Well, that's more for the evidence as a whole. I guess if you're talking about a particular PMID, it's a little different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because I guess on our end of like, Deb, to your point of like how we track this information and like warehouse all the PMIDs to eventually use like machine learning or whatever, the way that I've understood it from James explaining it is that it will only ever be good at suggesting if it's relevant to this criteria code. It won't automatically say if it meets it. So I think maybe Matt, maybe this is an idea to take back to him and see like what the proper way would be to like structure it on the like intake side of things to make it helpful for that purpose.
Yeah, I think we could discuss it on one of the BCI working group calls as well, like how we could go ahead implementing this and like thrash around some of the ideas around it as well. In fact, Deb, could you write a ticket in GitHub explaining your idea, and then we can move forward from there?
Yes, I can do that, Matt. I will do that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.